Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss the women's basketball collegiate recruiting process and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. I'm extremely excited for our guest today. She not only coached at my alma mater, but also gave me my first college coaching opportunity as a graduate assistant, Coach Jackie Hartzell. Jackie is entering her 10th season as a collegiate head coach. From 2013 to 2022, she was at the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia. Over her 9 seasons as the head coach at Sciences, her teams earned 5 trips to the NCAA Division II tournament, including a Sweet 16 run in 2018, and won 3 conference championships. Off the court, her teams made 6 straight Women's Basketball Coaches Association WBCA Academic Top 25 rankings. Jackie was named the CACC Coach of the Year in 2015, 2018, 2019, and 2020, as well as the 2017 Philadelphia Coaches Conference Collegiate Coach of the Year, 2018 Hero Sports Division II National Women's Basketball Coach of the Year, and 2019 WBCA East Region Coach of the Year. In 2022, Jackie found her new home at Arcadia University. She is currently entering her 2nd season as the head coach at Arcadia. Jackie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm honestly really excited to talk about recruiting with you because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I know recruiting is always a priority, but as you enter your first couple seasons at a new school, not to mention coaching at a different NCAA division level with Arcadia being Division III, I'd imagine recruiting is really at the forefront of everything.
Absolutely. Especially going into my 2nd season. I was in somewhat of a unique situation my first year where I inherited an extremely large roster, which started with 23 players. So recruiting wasn't so much of a priority my first season. But now that we have our roster down, we're excited to, bring in our first recruiting class.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's just kind of jump right on in. So when you're interested in a potential athlete for your program, where do you begin your evaluation? Can you just kind of walk us through that process?
Sure. So our evaluation typically begins with some sort of film. If a recruit is reaching out to us, we will immediately ask for film if they did not already include film in their initial email or text or message on social media. So we will ask for film. It's often highlight films, and if there's enough there in the highlights, we will then full game film, and then after that we really just like to watch players live as much as we can. I think, some coaches may feel like, I only need to see a player once or twice live. My staff and I, we kind of feel that, we want to see them play as much as possible. We want to make sure that the recruit is a good fit for us as much as, our system could be a good fit for them. So we will go to a ton of games, usually. It's a little bit easier during AAU season because there's multiple games in a day, tournaments with, a few days at a time. And then after that, it's getting the student athlete on campus for a visit. Sometimes we may set up a phone call prior to the visit just to kind of gauge their interest level, especially if it's somebody who's from outside of the Philadelphia area. So we will sometimes have the call. If not, we'll just set up a visit. And then from there, just, we continue to, see them play live. If, for example, right now, there's some fall events for high schools that we're attending to see our recruits play, some open gyms. And then once we get into high school season, just go into some high school games. But through that whole process, there's constant, maybe not constant, but consistent communication with the recruit to, we want to let them know that we still have interest if, there's been a few weeks with no AAU games or anything like that, or we want to just, check in every once in a while to make sure that they know that we're interested. And then, we appreciate when recruits reach out to us as well, just to stay in contact and keep us updated with their schedules, and just to kind of say like, hey, I'm still very interested in Arcadia, because, there's a lot of times where we're not really sure, how much interest a recruit has. So when recruits are interested in a school, I definitely would encourage them to, continue to reach out to the coaching staff to let them know that things haven't changed, and, that school is still high on their list.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important for a lot of high school athletes to understand, is just because maybe you haven't heard back from a coach or you're not getting the response that you might want, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't let your interest be known, because you never know. I mean, they could be in practice, they could be prepping for a game or something. You have no idea what their schedule looks like. So just constantly letting them know, not every day maybe, but, every so
Right.
often, hey, I'm still interested, and try to move that through that process as well. But there was something that you said about, so highlight film. What are the things you're looking for when a student athlete sends you like a highlight film, even length, or what you're looking for in that film?
I would say, just a couple minutes long, like, 3-4 minutes is definitely long enough. Um, I think highlights, show more. Obviously, it's going to be all good plays, and, you're not going to show turnovers and
Yeah.
things like that. But I think highlights, kind of gives us an idea of skill level. I mean, if it's kind of hard to highlight the intangibles, but that's why we're, watching full game film, and that's why we're going to see players live. But I mean, I think you could capture skill level in 2 to 3 minutes. You know, Scoring plays, charges we love to see, like things that can show a player's toughness. But I mean, I think that it doesn't have to be anything that's, super long, but usually that's something like, well, nobody really looks bad on highlights, but it's
Yeah.
something where we get their highlights and we're like, okay, like we want to see more.
Okay. So it sounds like that highlight film, that first checkpoint, they pass that, then it's a full game film. And so what are you looking for? You said intangibles a little bit there too. Like, are you watching a half? Are you watching the full game? I know you said that you want to see them play even live as much as possible, but is it something where it's like, oh, I saw this half, I'm good now, I need to see them live? Or are you watching that full game?
Usually full game. I mean, that can be a lot, but that's kind of what we have assistant coaches for. So I have an assistant coach who I would say is dedicated to just really watching those full games. And then, he'll say to me, like, you got to see this kid, you got to watch this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I generally think that especially during AAU season, if a player reaches out and takes the time to reach out and to send us their highlights, and sometimes we might not even ask for full game film, but it might, like, we would at least go and see them in a half live if
Mm-hmm.
if it's in an event that we're already planning on attending. But I would say full game film, when we do ask for it, that's usually like, we think the player's pretty good. So we typically will watch a full game film. And I think with that, it's good to see a full game, because in highlights, you can't necessarily see the level of competition. In a full game film, you can see, the type of team that they're playing against and what they can do against, hopefully the full game is against a decent team. And so I think that, that definitely matters. But yeah, sometimes we'll have, recruits send multiple games, and maybe we'll watch a half of each game, things like that. But I mean, I would say the more film you can send, the better. Like, give coaches options with the full games, and especially if they watch one full game and they still want to see more, then if you send multiple, they have another one right there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know a lot of high school athletes will express concern about sending a full game because they say, oh, I made mistakes or I didn't play extremely well, or, they're just afraid that their mistakes in certain games will hinder the coaches being interested in them. So what would you say to a student athlete who might say something like that?
Well, I think if you are hesitant to send a full game and you're hesitant to have a college coach see like your full game, then you're really risking, a coach recruiting you based on highlights and not the full player that you are. And then you get to that school and I just think you want a coach to see you as much as possible so that coach like you want to go to a school where the coach is sure that they want you no matter what, like despite
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
yeah, and the ugly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, despite your flaws, everyone has flaws in their game, but I think you want a coach to see that and maybe they see like, okay, she's not really great with her left hand, but we can work on that. We can make that better. Or, she doesn't have great feet. But that's something that, we play pack line defense, so it's not going to hurt her as much as like, whereas a team that presses the whole game and, you can't really tell in a highlight film that a kid doesn't have great feet. And then they get to that school and then they never get off the bench because they're not a good fit because the coach only saw the good.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important for a coach to see you, a decent amount of times.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you want people who want all sides of you, and at some point
Yes,
the curtain's gonna come down and they're gonna see
exactly.
exactly who you are. And so you definitely want to put that, maybe not the first thing you say, but like you want them to know that right away.
Exactly.
I've asked a couple, I think I've asked all the other guests that I've interviewed this, and it seemed to be an interesting question. So I'll ask you too. In I know Arcadia, the situation last year was a little bit different. So even think about sciences too.
Sure.
What percentage of the kids on your roster would you say you initiated contact versus them initiating contact with you?
Good question. Um, I would say early on at sciences, it was probably like 50-50 maybe. But as we became more well known for our success, I would say it became more like 75% of players that we targeted. Um, Now at Arcadia with the current class that we're recruiting, I mean, it's hard for me to really say because we're out so much. Like we are
Mm-hmm.
out recruiting so much that we have a really big list based on our evaluations. I would say now it's probably like 75% we reached out to, but again, we're trying to get Arcadia's name out there. So we're reaching out to a lot of recruits and we're in a different situation now where, we don't really even know how many we're going to, have committed with not having scholarships. So, but yeah, there's definitely been situations where, I mean, my first ever recruit at Sciences was Sarah Abenizio, and she reached out to us, or she reached out to me when I first got the job. And, she ended up being one of the best players to ever play at the school. So,
Yeah, she's
um,
great.
she had a great career. And that was somebody who reached out, spoke specifically about the school, what the school had to offer. She was interested in physical therapy, spoke about the school's physical therapy program. And when we get those types of emails, that's when we're really interested, rather than, a generic
Mm-hmm.
email. Like I used to get generic emails at Sciences and it would be like, I'm interested in education. Well, we don't have education. Like that's like an automatic delete,
Yeah.
because like you didn't do your research on the school. We don't have that. But even now, like I really I appreciate emails that are personalized. And they don't have to be like extremely detailed, but just say something about Arcadia that interests you.
Yeah.
Like don't let me think that we are one of 50 schools that you're sending this email to. And we very well maybe, but I'm less likely to pursue someone who sends like a very generic email, because if we're 1 out of 50, it's going to be very, very difficult. But if somebody sends, a personalized email and says, I'm familiar with Arcadia's physical therapy program. I know it's one of the best in the country. I'm very interested in physical therapy. Well, then I'm more likely to really put some time into watching the film and following up, because, that person expressed a specific interest in Arcadia. I've always been that way. Sciences, and I'm still that way now. Like, Sciences was obviously a very specific science school. Arcadia has just about every major, but I still want to see a reason why you're interested specifically in Arcadia.
Yeah.
And if I don't get that, I'm kind of hesitant to move forward, to be honest.
Yeah. Because honestly, it takes no more than 5 minutes to kind of pick out something specific. And it doesn't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be anything super descriptive. It's just like, this is what I'm interested in studying. And I see that you have 7 girls on the roster who are in that major. And
yes.
So I know that you're used to having these types of student athletes. So yeah, so I think, because my next question was going to be, since it's like 75-25, but I'm also sure that might be skewed a little, because if you're getting out there more, people might see you and think, oh, that school looks interesting. And then they reach out to you, but it's because you showed your face somewhere. But anyways, and I think that speaks a little bit to how do you stick out as the 25% is, just kind of express your interest a little more. And is there anything you would add to that to help that 25% stick out maybe a little bit more to you?
I mean, I think that number will change as we become more well-known, but I just think right now Arcadia hasn't really been like a winning program, not very like well-known. So I think that's in the 25%. But yeah, I mean, I really just think and it can be even like, I appreciate when a player might look to see like, like, congratulations on the team's first winning season since 1997, 98, like anything.
Yeah.
Like, you can pull up an article about the end of the season, like the previous season, and like anything that shows that you actually spent time learning more about the school, learning more about the program. And like you said, you could find that information in 5 minutes. But it's, and the other thing, I feel like I like to read an email that seems to be written by a student and not a parent. I think that's important. And even
or like an AI.
Yeah, like I mean, yeah. It just like, even with like email addresses in the recruiting books, or like at AAU events and things like that. Like, when we see it's like the parent's email address, it's like you don't really want to be, communicating with the parent. You want to talk to the athlete themselves. So, like, I think it's important for, student athletes to have their own email address and to be able to communicate with coaches, because if it's a parent who's like emailing, and then you get the kid and the parents on campus, and the student athlete doesn't speak, it's kind of like, is this going to be a good fit? You know what I mean? Like, you want people who can interact with coaches and have like a conversation and be able to look coaches in the eye and things like that. Like, all those things matter.
So I think that those are all really great points. And so let's say a kid, this is their first ever college visit, and they're coming to Arcadia and they're just super nervous and they don't know what to do about that. Like, what kind of advice would you give them on that first visit?
I mean, it's very simple, but like, speak. Like, like, just don't let your parents like speak for you the whole time. Like, I mean, as I'm sure many coaches do, like throughout like the tour or the visit, I'll make conversation and like just try to answer questions with more than one word and, just try to be, personable, even if you're nervous. I would come prepared with a couple questions. It doesn't have to be, you don't need to pull out a list. Some people do. And when they pull out a list, I'm like, that's impressive that they had a list of questions with them. But that doesn't, if they don't have a list, I'm like, why don't you have a list? But if we're going through it, we're finishing up with a visit and it's like, any questions, and they say no, I'm like, yeah, I don't. And I would say like questions, like there could be questions for a coach, and then maybe questions if you are introduced to players on the visit, like maybe, a question for a player, like, what's a day in a life like here? Like, how is it balancing your academics and, and basketball? Like, just like something. But again, like even a question for the coach, like, where do you see me fitting in? And, things like that. I mean, I'm pretty thorough on our visits, and I think sometimes I answer questions before they ask them, but at least like if I say, do you have any questions, and they say like, I think you answered all of my question, like something like that to show that like, you actually put some thought into this visit and some preparation.
Yeah, it is hard when you feel like you're lecturing at somebody and they're not really giving you anything back. And
exactly.
Yeah, that can be difficult. And so parents, it sounds like you're very interested in, okay, I want to get to know the student athlete. I want them to be able to advocate for themselves. And I just kind of want to get to know them and see their personality a little bit too. What advice might you have for like parents who, I don't want to say are overbearing is not the word, but parents who are heavily involved? Like, what would you tell them to do on a visit where they just want to kind of ask questions and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do, as much as I'm saying, like, I want to get to know the student athlete, it is important to get to know the parents as well. And to give the parents an opportunity to ask their questions. I mean, I would say just to let their, like, to basically let the student athlete ask questions first, before they ask questions. But I mean, that visit is definitely for parents as well, because as much as an athlete has to feel comfortable with where they're going for the next 4 years, the parent has to feel comfortable as well. And the parent should feel comfortable with the coach that they're basically sending their child to for the next 4 years. So I wouldn't tell like a parent not to ask questions, but to just encourage, like, maybe that's, on the drive to the school, like, just a talk, like, okay, what kind of questions are you going to ask? And then, and then maybe like whatever, if whatever the kid forgets to ask, the parent could add, and then they can have their own questions, which like, obviously, a kid's not going to ask as much about like financial aid and things like that. But, that's something that a parent needs to know the answers to. So I would still encourage them to ask questions, but just through the recruiting process, like, I don't love when I get like a text or an email from a parent, like, do you have a few minutes to talk? And like, unless it's about like the financial aid or things like that, like I want to talk to the recruit, to the player that I'm going to be coaching. So like, I would encourage, if it's an issue like that, like, like sometimes it's like, what kind of interest level do you have in my daughter? Like, well, your daughter could ask me that, like, and I would have no problem speaking to and I'll speak to the parent about it, but I'm just, more impressed if I hear directly from the athlete. So, I would just encourage like parents to kind of oversee the process, and definitely be involved in the process, but not be like overly involved. And to, that's part of growing up is, the player interacting with the coach. You want, especially if they're seriously considering that school, they're going to be playing for them for 4 years. So, you might as well have them start, interacting with them on their visit.
Yeah. And I think all of that was, I think, really good advice. But I think one tip that kind of stuck out to me was on the drive to the school, just like kind of a last minute prep. Oh, what questions do you want to ask? What information? That way the student athlete can get the parent's perspective as well of like, oh, what might be important for me to ask. So I think that was a really good tip. And on the visits that you conduct, are there certain questions that you like to ask all recruits? And like, do you have like certain questions that you ask every single one?
Um, I mean, one question that I usually ask is I ask if they have a timeline in mind in terms of a decision. And I've never been one, even when I was coaching Division II and had scholarships to offer. I've never really been big on deadlines. But it just gives me a general idea. Like, a lot of people will say, I want to decide, before my high school season starts, or I want to decide by the end of the season, or I want to decide by the end of the year. Like, it just gives us a better idea of, where they stand. So that's a question that I will ask. I know a lot of coaches will ask, what other schools they're looking at. That's something that I don't typically ask. It kind of depends on like the situation. And some recruits are very comfortable saying what other schools they're looking at, and some are just not comfortable at all. And I respect that. I don't need to know that information. But yeah, I mean, definitely timeline.
Are there any questions that is kind of like your, not litmus test, but your way of gauging, is this person going to be a right fit? Or do you have another way of kind of figuring that part out?
It's funny because I will, like, after the tour, we give a tour and then we meet with them after to talk more about the basketball stuff. Like after they meet with admissions, and we tour the school, we'll come back and we'll talk about basketball. And like the first thing that I usually say is like, well, what did you think? And like, they're always like, I liked it. And then after, I'm always like, they're not going to tell me they hated it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be like, I hated it,
yeah.
but
might as well just pack it up and leave now.
Right. And nobody has ever said I hated it. But I think sometimes you can kind of gauge their interest, because like some are like, I liked it, and some are like, I love it. Like usually if they say they love it, they at least liked it. Like, you know what I mean? So, and then like, I might follow it up, like, could you see yourself here? And again, they're usually not going to tell me no. And then I'll say like, what did you think? Like we have a smaller campus at Arcadia, like smaller class sizes, but I do think that that's something like, and I'll say to them, like, could you see yourself like on a small, like, at a smaller school? And they say yes, but usually like, that information before you're coming on the visit. Like, if you expect it Penn State and you got Arcadia, then you didn't do your research at all. You know what I mean? So people typically know it's a smaller school to begin with, but I do just like to ask them what they thought of the tour. And, and then just that's probably like the main thing. And then from that, just asking, maybe like, are you familiar with, Princeton offense, like, which some people are, some people aren't, but just like general questions like that. But it's really, for a coach, I think it's really hard to tell how much a recruit liked their visit, because like I said, they're not going to tell you that they hated it. But the one thing I do say, the one thing I always say towards the end of every visit is, I ask them like, I'll say like, the only thing I ask of you is if at any point, you no longer have interest in Arcadia, if you could just let me know. And, I would really appreciate that. We don't want to be showing up at your games. And you're like, why is she here? I don't even want to go to Arcadia. Or why is she texting me? I'm not interested. Well, because you didn't tell me that you weren't interested, And then I tell them to like, and again, we're in a unique situation because this is going to be our first recruiting class. But like, if at any point, we end up, our roster's filling up, like, or we say we only have 1 or 2 spots left, like, I'll let them know, like, we have one or two spots left on our roster, and we've basically offered those spots to 10 recruits. So, I try to be honest as well, because, I expect that honesty in return. And it's, I had a recruit call me yesterday and say that, she chose to commit to another school, and, rejection is part of it. Like it's not fun. It's not, nobody likes to be rejected, but, I'd rather at least her tell me now and I can cross her off the list and move on rather than her stringing me along when she has no interest in coming to Arcadia. So, and then there's some recruits that, we need to reach out to like this week to just be like, hey, like, are you still interested? Like, we're still interested. We just want to make sure that you're still interested.
Mm-hmm.
So, because we haven't really heard from them, which is fine because they haven't really heard from us. It's just that it's that weird time of year. AAU has been over since the end of July. High school season hasn't started yet. Some of these schools don't have open gyms. Some people play fall sports. So just like I mentioned earlier, that like, that consistent communication, but it works both ways.
Yeah. Cause it could be that lull, right? Cause in July, you probably see them like every weekend.
Yes,
and then it's just
exactly.
like nothing.
Yes, that's exactly how it is. So it's just, like I said, it's a two-way street though. Like we need to follow up, but they need to be responsive as well.
Yeah. And I imagine if they were proactive, it would make your job a lot easier too. And you might even look at them a little bit more favorably because it's like, oh, they're really interested. They've reached out.
Exactly. Yeah. People, I mean, and, I always tell recruits to go where you are wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something to be said about, recruits that want your school. Like we want people who want us. So when people show that they really want us, they move up on the list. Like, and sometimes they might not be as good of a player as somebody else, but, if they show like, that they're very, very interested in Arcadia, then, they move up a little bit on our list.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of going to go backwards because you said a word that made me think of something else when you said timeline and a question. So please think about your perspective at both Division II and Division III. But a question I get a lot is, oh, what should I be doing when? Like, I don't know if I'm behind. I don't know if I'm ahead, just in terms of the whole recruiting timeline. I'll get like sometimes seniors in high school saying like, oh, I really want this school. And I think, oh, that's like maybe a high Division I. I'm sure their recruiting class is done. Like you're a senior, so it might be a little bit late for that. But can you speak a little bit maybe about the timeline in general?
Sure. I mean, I think for Division III, for seniors, it's still very early. There's been some changes to FAFSA. So instead of FAFSA opening up on October 1st, like it has in years past, it's not opening until December 1st. So, some schools may be able to do financial aid estimates, but like you're not getting your official financial aid package till December or January. So, I still think it's early for Division III. For Division II, we typically were done by the early signing period, which is, I'm not even sure anymore, November, I think.
It's been too long.
Yes, it has been too long. We were typically like moving on to the junior class by that point. So if we were at Sciences right now, we probably would be finished or very close to finished. But I mean, that would vary from year to year, to be honest. Like we wanted to be done by this time, but sometimes it didn't work that way. Right now, I mean, it's Division III is it's a different world. I haven't gone through it a full year with recruiting. So, I can't speak too much to timeline with Division III, but it's still very, very early. I think that we probably will not have like our class completed until the spring. And then it's just going to depend on our roster size and how many people we have committed. I do think when you're looking with recruiting, when you're looking at a school, you do want to look at at a school's roster, look at the mix of upperclassmen and underclassmen. Like if it's a school, if it's a team that's loaded with freshmen, I would at least ask the coach, like would I have to wait till my senior year to play, like with all these freshmen on the roster, but also looking at, how long the coach has been there. And if it is a new coach, knowing that a new coach always wants to bring in their own recruits. So that's kind of the situation that we're in now, is we have some on our roster now who we probably would have recruited, but we want to surround those players with our own recruits. So If you're looking at a school with a newer coach, and then you most likely will have an opportunity to play right away.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any questions during a visit or whenever that is maybe like off limits, like a recruit should not ask?
I don't think so. Sometimes people will ask, like, for me, like personally, like, are you planning on staying here? Like, I think that's a good question, like, because I think that's like you're showing that you want to play for that coach and you want them to be there. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with that question. I mean, I think for me, I'm not interested in bringing in recruits who I can tell are, all they want is, to come in and score 1,000 points or any kind of like individual accolades. So, like if a recruit were to ask me, and I've never had one ask me, like, will I come in here and start? Like, that's kind of like, to me, that would be kind of an off limits question, because I just think
or like an off-putting question.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I've never had anyone ask me that question. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of any negative experience I've had with like a recruit coming on campus. Only one really comes to mind, and it was basically a recruit who spoke about another school and how beautiful their facilities were and things like that. And it's kind of like, all right, well then go there. Like, and I think she did actually. But like it was at Sciences, and she was talking about like a Division I school, and like, I mean, okay, like you don't want, but yeah, I mean, that's really like, I definitely, we as a staff are looking for, people who are about the team first. So it's like people who you can tell just want to be a part of something. And we'll tell them, like, if your goal in college is to score 1,000 points, like this probably isn't the place for you, because our goal is to win, not to, get you to score 1,000 points. You may score, we've had 1,000-point scorers. You may still do that, but the main goal is, to win first. It's not about you, it's about us type thing. So yeah, I mean, that's really all I can think of in terms of like a question maybe you should not ask.
Yeah, because the question you actually mentioned of like, are you planning on staying here? That's a concern I get a lot is, oh, I don't know if that coach is going to stay there. And I'll say, just ask them. And it's like they're afraid to ask that type of question, but you shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's a good, I mean, I don't think a coach is like going to come right out and say like,
yeah,
no, I'm applying for every job in this area. But at least like maybe they allow, like maybe a coach elaborates on why they do plan on staying. Like, I'm going to be here because, this is 5 minutes from my house. Like, I don't want to be anywhere else, like that, something that makes you feel better about them staying there. Or maybe you get the, if they're kind of, if they're not very sure in their response, like if they're kind of wishy-washy with how they respond, then you're like, well, maybe they won't be there. But I mean, ultimately you want to pick a school that you could see yourself at, whether you played a sport or not. So I don't think the coach should be like a major factor in your decision, but it should definitely be a factor. And, I think, one way to find more out about a coach would be to ask the players, like, if you have an opportunity for an overnight visit, like, hey, like, what's it like playing for Jackie? Like, what is she like? Like, ask them. Like, I always tell recruits to ask, because I don't feel like I have anything to hide. Like, I want them, like, but you could like go somewhere and they're like, it's not great. Like, and if everyone's like saying that, well, that's kind of like a red flag. So that's, like, I think if you do get that opportunity for that overnight visit, or even like if you're going to lunch with the players on your visit, like speak up, like ask questions, because it's better to have those answers.
Yeah. It's like you said, like the two-way street of like, you need to see their good, bad, and ugly, and they need to see your good, bad, and ugly.
Definitely.
And say like,
Definitely.
is that someplace where I want to be? And I think I agree with you. I think the like, are you going to stay question is very similar to the how was the tour question. It's like they're not going to say it's terrible or whatever, but you can kind of read the room a little bit. But Let's go to like the transition. So let's say a kid, you offer them, they commit, wonderful. That transition from high school to college can be really stressful. Like, what are some proactive strategies you recommend for athletes to excel academically and athletically?
Well, definitely academically, and everyone will say it's time management. It's time management, but it's like responsibility, accountability. Like this is the first time usually you're going to be away from home, and your mom or dad aren't waking you up and telling you have to go to school. So it's on you. Like I would just say develop good habits like right away, like go to class. Like that is very, very
Number
important
one.
is yes, go to class. And just, try to get off on the right foot. I mean, me personally as a student, I kind of, my freshman year, I definitely was kind of like, oh, I don't have to go to class all the time. Like I don't have to study all the time. And I didn't do nearly as well as in my first semester of college. And I did the rest of, because after my first semester, I'm like, all right, like enough of this. Like, like I just feel like if you can get off on the right foot academically, you'll make it so much easier for yourself the rest of the time that you're there. A lot of schools have a ton of resources for all students, but, even more so for athletes with study halls and, resources within the athletic department. Like, learning resource networks and tutoring and things like that, writing center, like, take advantage of that, especially tutoring early on. And, tutoring can teach you how to study in college, and definitely utilizing the resources that you have at your school with academics, and, try to get the best possible GPA your first semester, because it gets harder when you get into your, major specific classes. So, and then it's not easy to pull a GPA up. So you want to start with it, up and keep it there. And you don't, want to have to worry about school on top of the sport that you're playing. In terms of basketball, like, I just think, like coming to school in the best shape possible. Like a lot of times people are done, senior year, they're done their high school season. Now there's no AAU, and then they do nothing, and it shows. Or you have people who, like, it's very obvious, like who picked up a ball and who did not. And, a lot of schools will give like a summer workout program, and just doing that and coming in the best shape that you can, because, like you said, the transition is difficult. So you don't need, like, on top of school and on top of like learning a new system and things like that, like worrying about like conditioning. Like you want to just come back in shape, and that way you don't have to be, nervous going into that part of it. And then definitely utilizing your upperclassmen as resources academically and athletically, and, taking any advice that they're willing to give. Like they've been there, done that, they've been through it. And then just, continuing to communicate like with your coach, and, you want them to, think that you're excited about being there, and that, like, you're willing to put the work in to have a successful career. And, I think that's definitely important. And, like I said, like just always, even in the recruiting process, even after you commit, like I can't stress enough, like being responsive. And even in the recruiting process, like if a coach reaches out to you and you don't have interest in that school, like instead of just never responding, like just tell them, like it'll take you 30 seconds to say, like, thank you for your interest. Like, I'm looking for a bigger school, or I'm looking for something closer to home, or, I don't have interest in Arcadia, but I appreciate, your time. Because if a coach took the time to send you an email, like, I think that, you at least owe them the 30 seconds to reply. And I saw a tweet a while ago that said, like, you never know, like the coach of a school who's recruiting you, that, the coach of the school that you're not interested could end up being the coach of your dream school one day. So, if you do things the right way, you don't have to worry about that. Like, at your dream school, it's like, oh my God, I completely ignored that coach's email. Like, you'd rather it be like, I wasn't interested in that school, but I let her know and thanked her for her time, or, things like that. So just being responsive, and like the recruiting part, once you get to school, and, being a good communicator and all of that.
Yeah, it really doesn't take that long, and it's for the coach on the other end, it saves them so much time, because then they don't have to follow up with you
exactly
to try to get a response. So just be open and
transparent.
And
they know they receive, like, that you received, like, their email or their text or their call, so it's just, it's kind of common courtesy that doesn't always happen, but we appreciate when it does.
Yeah. Ghosting is never okay.
Right. Exactly.
So we are at the end now. And so I have a couple questions that I ask all of the guests. And so we'll just go through those right now. But what book or podcast would you recommend every incoming first year read or listen to before their first season begins, and why?
I'm big on the toughness book, Jay Billis. It really, it's been a long time since I read it. I think I do need to go back and read it again, but a couple things that really just like stuck out in my mind from that book. One of the things we talked about like the importance of being prepared, and how things are so much easier when you are prepared. It talked about, the intangibles, and, that toughness doesn't necessarily have to be about like skill or like physical ability or athleticism. There's so many other things that you can do to develop that like toughness skill, and you can always improve on that toughness skill. And, like I said, those are intangibles, and, every team could use toughness and needs toughness to be successful. And then the other thing that Jay Billis spoke about in that book that I still think of is, he talks about the next play mentality. And, when something, if you have a bad play, like, it's moving on to the next play, forgetting about it, and moving on, which is, sometimes a lot easier said than done. So that's a good one. And then one I have on my list I haven't read yet, but was recommended to me by Jesse Bowser, who's the athletic director at Chestnut Hill. Chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
That's my Philly accent.
Yeah.
Chop wood, carry water. I heard that's a good one. I have that's a pretty
good one. Yeah. It's very easy and quick.
And it's sitting on my nightstand. So that's one that I plan on reading. I've heard great things about that one as well.
Okay, cool. And what is something about the recruiting process or transition to college that you believe that other coaches might disagree with?
I don't think that a player, two things. One, I would say it's not necessarily about going and playing at the highest possible level. It's about best fit. So, finding where you're going to fit in, and, finding what you want in a school. Like, some people believe like, oh, if you can go, big time Division I, go big time Division I. Well, I mean, for some people that's great, but for others, it's like, I want to, contribute. I want to play right away, like finding the best fit. So, I mean, most coaches probably would agree with finding the best fit. The other thing is I'm not big on deadlines, and I mentioned that previously, but I don't think that like you should commit to a school just because you were given a deadline by a coach, because that's why probably part of why there's so many people in the transfer portal right now. Like, you just want to be sure. Like, if you're not sure, then maybe do another visit, do an overnight visit, go to a practice, like figure out what it is that's making you not sure. But if you're not sure, like, I don't think that it's a good idea to commit just because a coach put a deadline on a scholarship or on a roster spot. Like, I think you want to commit because, you want to go there, not because the coach said you have to, give me an answer by October 1st.
And then last but not least, any final words of wisdom?
I mean, I talked about fit. I talked about being responsive. I mean, I think that when picking a college, you want to look at, the whole purpose of going to college, and where college is supposed to get you. And I will quote the great Coach Dave Pauly, and it's not just 4 years, it's 40 years. So Dave Pauly is,
Yeah.
the former men's coach at U Sciences. And he would always say that it's not 4 years, it's 40 years. So, if there's something you're interested in studying, like, or, an occupation or job that you have in mind, like make sure the school has that and can put you on that path, and don't get caught up in just choosing a school for athletics. You don't want to go to a school for 4 years, play a sport, and be like, okay, now what am I going to do? And now I'm going to have to go somewhere else for 4 years. Like, I think you can find the best of both worlds, and you can find a school with good athletics, but also has the major that you're looking for and put you on a good path, to that career that you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Coach Pauly myself. I mean, quote Coach Pauly myself. That yeah, he's a character.
He'd be
Well,
a good guest.
he would be, yeah. He'd be, yeah. I might have to reach out to him.
Yeah, he would be entertaining. That is for sure.
Yeah.
He would be really, really good.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's all I have. If anybody wants to learn more about Arcadia or follow you all or anything like that, what do you have any like social media? I know you do, but what are your social media handles?
Oh God, I don't do our social media, so
Okay.
I'm not even 100% sure, but I know we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. My email address is on the website. I believe you can get to our social media through the website as well. So, yeah, if anyone has interest in Arcadia, I would definitely, love to hear from them. And, like I said, send me those highlights and, let me know what specifically interests you about Arcadia. And then we could go from there.
All right. That sounds good. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening. If you are looking for more specific recruiting advice based on your recruiting situation, head over to hoopsthroughlife.com today and schedule your free 30-minute strategy session with me. We will assess where you are currently in your recruitment process, where you want to go, and then we'll lay out the roadmap to get you there. Again, that is hoopsthroughlife.com, HOOPSTHROUGHLIFE.com. And if you have any questions, you can also email us at l@hoopsthroughlife.com. That is el@hoopsthroughlife.com. Or even if you want to ask a question to a next guest, let me know there, drop in those questions, and I'll fit them in on our next interview. I look forward to meeting with you soon.